7:01, calling the meeting to order on September 12, 2018. Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so first thing, we have to swear our new trustee.
Oh, here. A bag of
What is she? Oh, okay, okay. Okay. So, I'm going to repeat, I'm repeating, yes. I'm going to speak and then repeat after me. So, I, Tamara Jost,
I, Tamara Jost,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the rules, regulations, and ordinances
the rules, regulations, and ordinances
of the Village of Morton Grove,
of the Village of Morton Grove,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
all the duties of the office
all the duties of the office
of Morton Grove Public Library Trustee
of Morton Grove Public Library Trustee
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Go ahead, you're going to have to sign here.
All set.
Awesome. All right, yes. Sign this. Roll call. Invalid. Here. Masoncheck. Here. Munzo.
Yes.
Pelletier here. Kuzo. Here. Swanson.
Here.
Jost. Here. All right. So, first, I will make them,
So I was going to say, so if there's no changes or whatever, these can all be approved as one.
Okay.
And then, just in case everyone didn't notice, the August 8th executive session minutes were in the second packet of information, so.
Do you feel a reason to necessarily review them separately?
I don't have anything.
Yeah, I didn't either, so. All right, well, then I will make a motion to approve the regular board meeting minutes for August 8th, 2019, executive session minutes for August 8th, 2019, special board meeting minutes for August 22nd, 2019, and executive session minutes for August 22nd, 2019.
All those in favor of approving those 4 sets of minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
That's great attention. Public comments, agenda items only, there's no public. Resident report, well, first, welcome to our new trustee. Very excited to have you. And committee appointments.
I just made a note to myself,
Yeah.
especially since Tamara is new,
Mhm.
that committee appointment preferences should be sent to Emily or via me to Emily. And then I would recommend that appointments are made at the October.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So, there, you can kind of take a peek, but this is the contact sheet. So Mick and Tamara, if you guys want to let me know your preference. So there's executive, which comprises of myself, Carlotta, and Joanne. Then there's finance, there's facilities, and there's policy. So definitely let me know your preference. We can definitely answer any questions if you have any questions about what the committees comprise. I mean, it's pretty low key. I mean, there's not too much, but and we will want to keep it somewhat even, like 2, 2, 3 or something like that. So
Where do you need people?
I mean, right now we need facilities, but I don't think, but I think policy, especially for a newer board member, isn't a bad idea either. So, but
There's more in-depth explanations in the bylaws, which are in your binder, and I think we've got a copy of those, Nick, as well. policy meets quarterly, and we usually review 3 to 4 policies as a regular rotation. Now, we will review other policies throughout the course of the year, depending on if, a law changes, or there's or a procedure changes, or we make some change that requires us to change our policy. So sometimes there's policy-related issues that will come before the full board that the policy committee hasn't met on. Facilities, we don't usually do too much, though. Fingers crossed, moving forward, if we start working on YS renovations, some of that might be more frequent as well. The big facilities thing we do is our annual walkthrough, which will be happening in October, but that's kind of a committee as a whole, and so everyone does that. But, and then finance, as the treasurer, Carlotta comes in and signs checks every week, but then before this meeting, we had explained to Tamara that the finance committee meets and they review the financials for the previous month and just try to see if there's any issues or whatever, but because Carlotta does see the checks and stuff every week, usually most of those questions are answered during the course of the month. But, so yeah, there's, we're pretty fortunate in that the board gets along really well, and I think that a lot of the business runs pretty smoothly, even meeting as a whole. I've been in other places where they really rely on committees just to kind of keep the board meetings running smoothly and just to minimize the the business discussed at the board meeting, so.
So no rush, but take a look at the bylaws, and if you guys feel like you have a preference, definitely let me know, and then we'll do the appointments in
How
October.
long are you on the committee? I forgot.
Forever.
I think it's annual.
No, I thought it was 2 years.
I don't think there's any limit to the length of time you can be on a committee, but you're initially appointed for 2 years, but you can be reappointed
To a committee.
to the same committee.
But you can't be reappointed to the same executive committee. That's what I'm being confused.
Well, executive committee is always made up of the officers.
Right,
So as
but
long
you can only, but you can't, I can't be on the finance committee from now until 2025.
Sure you can.
You could be on
I
finance.
think that was changed in the last revision of the bylaws.
I think you have to.
But I will.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna look that up.
We specifically amended the bylaws to say Carlotta.
It's in there. It says your name. I will double check that and look into that, but it is my recollection that the term limits, there were no term limits, that the terms are 2 years, but there was no limit to the number of times you could be reappointed.
Because I did the bylaws and I just tried.
Yeah, the bylaws before that, I think they did say that, and there was some problem getting people to serve on the committees then. And so then we had changed that with the last revision. And then one meeting when you weren't there, we put your name in that. But I'll double check and verify it.
Alrighty. So committee reports, so finance.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the financial reports for August 2019. Go. Are there any questions?
So Tamara, just to give you some background, so what you'll see every month is a listing that we put together that's all of our various bank accounts, and so that kind of tells you the cash on hand that we have. Then you see what's called a master total portfolio report. We do have some operating reserves that are invested in CDs, and those are invested on a rolling basis. And I work with our investment manager at PMA to renew those, or not renew them as we need. The income statement shows all of the library's revenues throughout the year, and then the expenses.
Gotcha.
So, and then it tells you at the end, like, how much of our expected revenue, or how we're spending, or expected expenses. And this month, I don't know what percentage of the year is done, but we're actually doing pretty well. So, and you can, I think the rest of it seems to be fairly self-explanatory, but if there's anything that you have questions on, just let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Kind of do it quick. And then you'll see the check register for the past month. That's the previous month.
And if you have any questions on checks,
Yeah.
big amounts or something. I mean, everybody asks the question on check number 3755, which is a win, which is always so big. It's insurance.
That's our health
Just so you know.
insurance.
What was the voided check? You didn't rewrite it.
Yeah, we did.
It was not rewritten.
No, it wasn't rewritten.
370,
Yeah,
3740.
It was voided, there was a performance, one of the performance, yeah.
Okay, so,
And we weren't able to rebook it, so.
got it.
Cancel check, cancel performance.
That sounds, yeah, you don't miss it.
Anybody else, questions?
All right, we can vote on that. Okay. Lisa Chair?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
Pelletier, yes. Puzo?
Yes.
Swanson?
Yes.
Jost? Yes. Gonzalez?
Yes.
Facilities, we'll be doing our walkthrough next month. Policy, we did not meet.
Just a reminder, for those that are still on the policy committee, that our next meeting is still scheduled for Monday, October 7th at 9:30. So that does not work for anyone.
All right. Staff reports.
So first, does anyone have any questions about my written report? I can answer before I talk about some other things. If not, in addition to my written report, we've made some staffing changes, or upcoming staffing changes. So I sent this email out to all staff this afternoon. I said, in case there haven't been enough changes this year, I thought I'd make some staffing changes. No, I didn't say quite like that. As everyone knows, Chad's been transitioning away from adult services into the marketing and engagement coordinator position. That transition will be complete effective October 1st. We are eliminating the teen librarian position as a separate position, and that youth services will now serve birth through 8th grade, and adult services will serve high school ages and up. We felt, after a lot of discussion, that this would better serve our patrons, particularly the middle schoolers, who kind of get lost a little bit. The teen room will remain as is. Effective October 1st, James Facer, our current teen librarian, will transition to, I don't want to say just, but an adult services librarian and take on some of the more standard adult services librarian duties. Brittany Drehobel, who's the school services liaison and youth services, will be taking over all of the school visits, some that James did as well, and then serve up through the middle schools, and then both departments will continue to work to provide collections and services and programs. So yeah, we're all pretty excited about that. Youth Service was really happy. It's something that they've been asking for a while, and it made some sense. There'll still be some kind of, teen room is still going to be upstairs. There's still going to be some teen collection up there, but we think that over time that will be a better service. So that was a change. As a result of these changes, both YS and the Adult Services Department needed some additional staff hours, mostly for desk coverage. So they're each getting 16 additional hours of staff time. And Alyssa Burke, who currently is a circulation clerk too, and just recently completed her MLS, will be taking a part-time position in adult services. And Courtney will be hiring another part-time person. And Jeff, one of our part-time circulation clerks left to take a full-time position at Highland Park. He's losing Alyssa, so we're working on making some additional changes in circulation, so those are still to come. And then last but certainly not least, Blanche is retiring at the end of this year. Her official last day is December 23rd, a Monday.
That's coming fast.
Yes, it's
Coming
coming
in on
fast.
Monday?
Yeah, it's a Monday.
It's the last day for payroll.
It's the last payroll day. So fortunately though, as we started talking about this, we realized and recognized one of the computer assistants, Teresa Darka, has a fairly substantial background in bookkeeping and finance. And so we spoke to her, and she's actually going to be transitioning into administration. So over the next few months, she'll be working with Blanche to take over that position. It probably won't be full-time. It'll probably be a part-time position. But that gives us a lot of opportunity to make sure that once Blanche is gone, there'll be a smooth transition to that. So
she'll be doing part-time Blanche and part-time what she's doing?
no, she'll transition out of she won't be a computer assistant any longer. I mean, at least in some training, at least for the next month or so, with some training stuff, she'll probably do both a little bit. But probably mid-November, she'll be only in village services, or only in administration.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it gonna stay at the position?
For
You, as an administrator?
probably, I think, we'll have to see. I mean, I think that Blanche and I are still kind of working that out, figuring that out. Right now, we're thinking 25 hours a week, but depending on, I do a lot of HR things that, you know, potentially if Teresa can do, that may still be a full-time, but we haven't fully decided that at this point. But right now, we're kind of thinking 25 hours a week.
But she doesn't do full-time in the technology?
No, she's only there
Oh, I didn't know
18
that.
or 19 hours a week.
People from full-time. Okay.
Yeah, she's not full-time.
That's it.
So yeah, so I just wanted to add that. So, like I said, lots of changes, but I think absolutely all to the benefit of the library and our patrons. And I don't have anything else to add unless anyone else has any questions on my report.
Did you go to, there was some, where it was the village meeting, village board meeting September 9th?
Yeah, I was gonna report on that under,
This business? Oh, cool.
yeah, but I can.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
No, we go ahead.
Since that's next.
Well, it's right in, doesn't it?
Yeah, nothing from Frank. I did go to the village board meeting, which was this past Monday. So Tamara, we've been trying to sell the 6200 Lincoln Avenue building for 3 years now. So we're getting closer and closer. The village board, the entire board heard, after I sat through, I don't want to say sat through in a bad way, but they were inducting new firefighters.
Oh, I saw that post.
It was very crowded with firefighters at the village board meeting on Monday. They had the first reading of the special use permit. Both the appearance and plan commissions, I think as I mentioned before, have met and unanimously approved the plans as presented to them by the buyer and the architect. And they are recommending to the full board, or recommending approval of the special use permit to the full board. There was one resident that got up and spoke, and he said he wasn't against the plans, but he raised concerns about that he felt that selling the building was short-sighted because of parking, specifically mentioning that, you know, if for some reason St. Margaret's no longer leased the parking lot to us, that we would have no place to park. I was in the audience and I didn't say anything, but you know, that is the thought. It wouldn't give us enough parking places to make up for that. The mayor asked him if he had spoken to the library board, and he said he had not. So I don't think this will have any impact, but so like I said, he did mention that, you know, his concern about parking, and then also mentioned that the library had chosen not to purchase property at an earlier time, which I think actually goes back at least to Ben Shapiro. So I mean, we're talking about 10 years ago at least. So just that, like I said, I don't think that will have any impact on the village board's decision. So I left right after the meeting ended, but I do know that the buyer and architect was talking to a few trustees, and the very next day, the buyer emailed our broker and said, everything went well last night. We got praise from all trustees and the mayor. Second reading is September 23rd. I have directed Stephanie to set up a closing the next day or as soon as possible afterward. The holidays are coming up and want to close before that. So I feel more confident than ever before that this will go forward. The village, like I said, all the village trustees have been very impressed with the architect's plans and are excited to see something else happen with that building. So this could conceivably close before our next meeting. even. We may not have to go. I know that Frank had indicated at one other time when we got a little bit closer that he would be handling the closing. Obviously, once I find out, I'll be at the September 23rd meeting. I'll let the board know via email as soon as that happens. And we can count down the dollars after that. So I'm kind of like, I don't want to say anything until we have the money in the bank, you know, the check paying out that building. So things are really moving, and I'm feeling very confident. Fingers and toes crossed.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, well, thank you. All right, any questions for, and anything else on the?
Well, the question on the professional development provider capability. Why did we get involved with that?
One of the youth services librarians had attended a program or was talking to a colleague of hers, and there's a couple of libraries that provide that sort of thing, and Jess indicated that she thought that was something that we could easily do that would be an additional service to our local area teachers. Especially because of the things that Jess does. She does a lot of programming associated with math, and she's done some programs for librarians about how to put on programs for math and to teach kids about math and to love math and science. She's particularly interested in those areas. And she feels that she can tweak a number of those types of programs that she's already done that would meet the professional development continuing ed requirements for a lot of the teachers. So there was no cost to us to do this, and so we just thought it was an additional service we could provide for area teachers. Yeah, we were just notified. We applied back in April, and I hadn't heard anything. And finally, Jess came to me a couple weeks ago, and she said, "Have you heard anything?" And I'm like, "Oh, I totally forgot. It fell off my radar." And so when I reached out, they're like, "Oh, we sent you back in June, whatever, an email." And I'm like, "Oh, you didn't?" Then I thought, "Oh no, did I miss it?" And I didn't. I didn't get it. So we just found out a couple weeks ago that we qualified. So we'll start to do some more potential advertising about that as well.
I think it's a great idea. Jess does a great job with it.
Yeah,
So I'm sure the teachers around the local schools use that.
Any other questions for Pam? I wanted anybody else. All right. So new business. Schedule annual walkthrough.
Just a reminder, if at least at this point, October will be the second reading and approval of the budget, but assuming there are minimal or, fingers crossed for me anyway, no changes, or the board decides on what they want to do, that could go relatively quickly. I know that the walkthrough does take some time, so we always try to have it on a meeting that there isn't a lot of other business that we have to take care of. And the approval of the budget at this point is the only thing that I can think of off the top of my head that we would have to address.
And the sale.
And at that point, it will be done, hopefully, right? And so I'll just be reporting on that, but yeah, so I think that if we want to schedule it for October, I think that,
On the night of the board meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So plan on being here a little longer.
Yeah. And that board meeting, I guess we just look this up when we say it was.
October 10th. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. Next, well, just go ahead. I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2019-04, resolution authorizing transfer of funds from the general library fund 10 to special reserve fund 20 in the amount of $4,111.53.
Shall we talk about it when Claire gets there?
We can, or if you want to explain to Tamara what it is, or possibly Nick as well. I don't know if he was here since we did. I can't remember. I can't believe it's September anyways.
I know. So, if you look on this page.
Cash statement.
The cash statement, yes.
The petty cash of Fifth Third Bank, or Fifth Third. we're transferring out of that 4,000 because we only want to keep like 2,000 in there. So we do that whenever, or she'll do it whenever.
We track it and usually we'll transfer anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000 depending on how much is in there. We do a resolution because our auditor has asked for that paper trail. We used to just transfer it and then there was no real paper trail. So this year we started doing a resolution for every time we have to transfer that. So you'll see these over the course of the next several years or whatever because just to provide the auditors with that paper trail.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
And that money, when we get, most of this money comes from like the vending machine, copies, printouts, I think, I don't know, like that.
When they purchase books.
Yeah, different things like that. So, it gets deposited initially into what we call our operating fund, so like the fund that we use to pay all the bills and that kind of thing. But we transfer that money into our special reserve fund, and by law, the special reserve fund can only be used to make building renovations or purchase new property or that kind of thing. So this money will be transferred into the special reserve fund, which we're hoping to, that we're trying to build up to make YS renovations.
We want to table it until Eric gets back, so we have the full board voted.
We can. Or, yeah, that's fine. The next two items require a vote
That's
as
true.
well.
That's
And probably what you want.
Yeah.
I would say you could probably vote on this one, because the next two you probably want him here for.
Okay.
Okay, so,
And
so he's not present, mom's present.
and then the minutes, Blanche, will indicate when he left the room and when he came back.
Oh,
So,
well, I'll keep track
Like
when he came back, but.
Yeah.
I have one to keep track.
and then we know when he left and then we're gonna figure out when he.
I'll leave it on here for you. Okay, so Pelletier, yes. Puzo?
Yes.
Swanson?
Yes.
Jost?
Yes.
Gonzalez? Lisa J?
Yes. Well, I could add one. That's fine. All right, so I feel like we're gonna want to talk about this one. So the HVAC unit replacement.
So you have in your packets a proposal from Midwest Mechanical with our regular PM, our preventative maintenance on our 11 HVAC units.
11, I thought it was 13, okay.
Oh, that's better, there's only 11.
I know.
Yeah, it's a little insane, this building. This was actually budgeted for in the 2019 budget.
It was, okay.
Yes, so there are currently funds for it, but given the amount, I just wanted to present it to the board for the formal approval. But it was, like I said, it was in my 2019 budget, which was approved as well. So this is not extra, this was planned for. What is really ironic is that the unit that we're replacing has been operating okay. It's older and it's the one actually that caused the leak as well in the computer room. But there's another unit that's around the same age as this one that will need to be replaced, that we'll be replacing next year. But it's the one that we're replacing next year that's been more problematic right now. But they both need to be done. So the proposal in front of you is from Midwest Mechanical and it explains everything that they'll do. They will need a crane to remove the unit and install the new one. Usually when we've had that done before, it's not been a problem. We just have to lose a couple of them. We'll have to figure it out because of where this unit is. It's over my office.
Right.
So it's at that corner of the building. So there might be some traffic displacement down the east alley there. So we'll just have to wait to see where that ends up being. But Midwest Mechanical handles, getting the crane, all the permitting, everything like that. So, like I said, but this was in the budget, there are funds, it was previously approved, but I just wanted to get final formal approval from the board.
Well, why didn't we get more than this? Well, Because they're the only ones that can do it.
Yeah, pretty much at this point, especially because they do our PM and everything. And one of the other things that they've started doing with us, that Midwest Mechanical is part of a nationwide cooperative. And so, and we just signed up with them as well. And one of the nice thing about that is that they kind of guarantee competitive pricing, and then as a public institution, we don't have to go out for bid for some of those things. And this is still under the threshold for going out for bid.
Okay.
But it's kind of guaranteed.
Just barely under.
No, the threshold for going out to bid is 25,000. It used to be 20, but it was raised, was it last year? I think the statute was changed to 25. But they do all of our PM maintenance and everything. So, and they know the building really well, which is important for this building because it is so crazy here, especially, like I said, with the number of units.
I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of the HVAC unit in the amount of $19,957. Rizzo? Yes. Swanson?
Yes.
Jost?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mason?
Yes.
Longo?
Excuse me.
So is there the proposal for purchase of replacement laptops?
This was not previously approved in the budget. This is the proposal, the quote from OSG. Tamara, we outsource our IT, and Outsource Solutions Group is the name of the group that is our provider to that. And we've done a lot of work this year to bring all of our IT, our automated systems and IT up to snuff, if you will. We've been kind of lagging behind for the past few years. This is a proposal to replace all of the laptops that are in the library that are for in-use checkout, that we use for programming, that we use for classes. We currently have laptops that are, I think the newest one is 8 years old. And we have a couple that don't turn on. These can no longer be upgraded. They're currently running Windows 7. Support for Windows 7 ends at the end of 2019. And something else I was going to say, I can't remember now, but if we turned on one of the laptops now, it would take 5 to 7 minutes to log on, to turn on. So it's been really problematic to use them for anything. When we have, the last time we had OSG take a look at them to let us know if they could be upgraded, they couldn't even get half of them on. And so as a result of that, we've done fewer computer classes and that kind of, and it's been harder to use them for in-house programming as well, that the librarians may have had to use them for. So while this was not previously budgeted for in the 2019 budget, we do have funds to cover this out of our construction and progress. And one of the things about, if you look at the automation line in the income statement, while we are certainly over and will be over by the end of the year what was budgeted for, as you may remember, the 2019 budget, the automation budget was designed under completely different circumstances with the old IT manager who, over time, we had figured out did not know his job as well as we had hoped. So we're doing a lot of upgrading of the IT systems this year, but next year everything should be much more in line, and we'll just, with our hassle-free program and then support of the licensing and that kind of thing. But with the replacement of staff PCs and now with the replacement of laptops, hopefully there will be very little hardware and software replacements that we'll have to do that will be out of the ordinary. We'll be on an upgrade cycle after that. So we're hoping that the board approves that this year so we can get all of those things taken care of now.
In this year's budget?
Yes.
And the purchase is from OSG?
It's through them.
Okay,
So, yeah, and they job it out to get the lowest prices. And then they do all of the install of all of the software and the operating
support
systems.
those.
Yes.
Right.
And then everything gets on the network so that if there's any troubleshooting or any maintenance that needs to be done, as they've done with the PCs and stuff like that, they can do a lot of that remotely. And we're starting with new equipment.
What says your estimated installation service is 11,000. But we're paying $13,000 for the
But then that's in
equipment.
parentheses also, it seems like that's
Yeah,
not
and
part
then
of
you
it.
took it away, that's what I'm gonna, yeah.
So what that is, they don't charge us a dollar amount for installation for these things. We purchase hours with them.
I got it.
So, and also as part of our hassle-free agreement with them, of the monthly bill that we pay to them, we get a certain number of hours of work from
Oh,
them.
okay,
So
okay.
when they do this is basically, if we paid for labor, this is what it would cost.
Okay.
But we're paying, yeah, but we pay for that in a different way.
So they'll take it out of, we're already paying monthly? Those
If they
hours?
can do, if they can do that as part of our general, our general contract, they're really good about doing that. They try to do any upgrades and stuff like that they can as part of the regular contract.
Okay.
Anything extra they would take out of those hours that we purchase.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of replacement laptops from Outsource in the, do you want me to list how many notebooks or not necessarily?
I think just a dollar.
Okay, in the amount of $18,588.28.
Swanson?
Yes.
Jost?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Munzo?
Yes.
Luzar?
We will make my department head very happy. Yeah, well, I mean, they've been talking about replacing these for years, literally, and it's just, we haven't done it.
Yeah, have you been managers?
Yeah.
My managers, yes. When I first came back, I was calling everyone managers, and then I got used to calling everyone department heads again. Now I'm like managers.
Okay, so 2020 budget.
I thought if we could just, if you wanted to, I just wanted to point out the communications before we got into that, just because I thought there were some really nice things.
Yeah.
I did think that the one comment from the one patron about putting remote vending.
Yeah.
Palm Station?
Yeah, those sound good, they don't usually ever work the way they're supposed to, but,
We've tried it.
yeah, we talked about it.
Other side.
And the other thing is that they're probably about $135,000.
150 in her.
Yeah, yeah, so that's a
150.
150 thing.
150, yeah.
So anyway, but some really nice things and a $500 donation as well. Yeah, I think there was a copy of the check
Right here in the back.
on the back page. They never got $500. Yeah, so I opened it up and I read the really nice note, and then I opened up the check and I was really pleased by that.
That's
So
really awesome.
that was very nice.
I just like the double, like what, 50? Oh, 500.
And the letter from Jake Lawrence at the village.
Yeah.
After the first census complete count committee meeting, Edmund and I, Edmund is the newer librarian and the service department, we feel like we will be an integral part of the census push from the village, but that's fine. If you read through the report and under Natalia's section, she did show the two logos. I have the pin, we're making pins for the census. And our very own Karina designed the logo for the
She's really
great. Yeah, so she's great. We are super lucky.
She does a nice job on that logo.
Yeah, so if you want to pass it around. So we'll be making pins. We've got some other ideas about the census and stuff too. so.
Well, no, really nice talking to Jody. What's it about the?
I have not responded to her. I will be happy to.
I mean,
I
it's
was
great that
curious
she
if
loves
you-
the library and wants more library, but, you know.
I mean, it's.
But you get a lot of suggestions that you need to just be like, oh, thanks.
We do get a lot of suggestions.
Okay.
Usually they're handwritten, we have a suggestion box, and so usually Natalia goes through the ones that are at, because there's a suggestion box, I think it's at adult services and there's one in youth services. So the two, Courtney and Natalia go through the ones for their respective departments, because a lot of them are by this book sort of thing, so that I don't need to see those, but then I usually get the ones that are more general, or they're a comment about a staff person, and usually they're always positive, or, some other comment about something they want us to do. And if it's possible or appropriate, we'll try to do that, but sometimes, I don't know what it is. Yeah, but those are, like I said, they're mostly just handwritten. We get a lot of little kids that write, we love the library, so. Yeah. Those are ours. I like those better than that. How come you're not doing this?
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing those. That's nice. Okay. 2025
Did you do public comments?
I'm sorry?
Did you, do we do public comments, non-agenda?
I didn't.
We can.
I can't, public comments, not agenda items.
So is that it?
Okay, all right.
Oh, darn.
Okay, so for those of you that haven't done this before, you have the budget documentation that I put together here. So there are my budget notes, which takes you through, I don't break out the revenue lines, those are fairly self-explanatory, but it takes you through our expenses, and I try to explain where those, what's included in each of those budget lines and why I'm asking for the amounts that I am asking for. So I can just go through those, hopefully not too, or relatively quickly, and then field any questions from the board. The big increase this year, it's not a huge increase, but it definitely is an increase from last year. Well, let me start with the revenues, I'm sorry. So as you can see, I've presented several possible levy requests. And when we talk about levy requests, what I'm specifically talking about is the amount that we ask the village to levy for us. As a village library, we have a separate board and we create our own budget and everything like that. As by law, the village is required to levy any amount that we ask them to. We want to remain on good terms with the village, so we try not to ask for a lot of money, that kind of thing. So when I talk about levy requests, what I'm talking about increasing or decreasing or keeping flat is that top line, that $3,100, the amount of money that we're getting from taxes. Because you'll note if you look at all the various scenarios that the income from everything under 3,100, like 3110, not 3110, but everything else, those pretty much are my estimates for what we're going to get in those lines, and those stay the same. The number that changes is that one on the top. So I've given you a flat, what things would look like with a flat request, up through a 3% increase in levy. And then I broke down under notes on the ledger size sheet. You can see how much extra that is over the flat request. And then I broke it down along the top where there's approximately 8,200 households in Morton Grove, and then this is a household increase, approximately, depending on the different levy requests. And then the total is what the total budget would bring in for that year. Any questions so far? So when we get down to expenses, as I said, I am showing an increase in salaries, both in exempt and non-exempt. Exempt staff are those that are not subject to the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act, overtime wages. So basically they're paid a salary, they're paid by their job, their position, and then non-exempt are paid hourly wages. Most of our positions are non-exempt. Even most of our professional librarians are non-exempt. There's only, I think, a total of 12 of us on staff that are exempt. So we made that change a couple years ago when under President Obama he was raising the minimum wage for the minimum salary for being considered exempt. And even when that didn't go through, we went ahead and changed most of the staff to non-exempt, which is kind of a cultural change, a people saw exempt as being professional, and it took them a while, but they get it now that non-exempt just means you're actually paid for the hours that you work, and that I have to pay you overtime if you work over 40 hours. So we chose to keep those.
Why in the exempt is it $100,000 difference between what we approved and what was estimated?
Because the IT position,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
so, yeah.
I looked at that and I'm going, why?
Yeah, so that was the IT manager was an exempt position.
Okay.
And then when we chose to eliminate that position,
Gotcha.
that made up for most of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So the increase in salaries comes from, as I explained in my budget notes, we did have, and I also included this, HR source do a compensation structure analysis for us. And if you read through it and looked at the dollar amounts, basically, while our minimum salaries are okay, we have a number of staff that are under the midpoint. And one of the things that I met with them after they developed this, and one of the things that they said, so when we started doing this project, I had to choose 12 to 14, 15, 16, something like that. I think I gave them 16. Comparable libraries. So libraries that have either a similar population, similar budgets, similar staff size, to see where we compared. You know, our goal is always, you know, the thing that makes a library great is the staff, hands down here. And so we always want to make sure that people are appropriately compensated for the work that they're doing and that we remain competitive. And so in addition to those libraries that are similar to us in terms of size and population and those kinds of things, I also asked to be compared to libraries that are geographically close to us, since quite frankly, we are competing with Skokie and Niles and Glenview and Northbrook for that same labor pool. And so we want to make sure that, you know, to hire people or to retain people that we're keeping, you know, that we're keeping comparable with those libraries as well. So when HR Source did that benchmarking, what they found is that a fair number of our employees are, particularly of our professional staff, are well under the midpoint. And one of the things that they have explained to me is that while they show in salary breakdowns a minimum, midpoint, and maximum, really you shouldn't be hiring anyone at the minimum, because the minimum is someone that, let's say, I'm going to use a professional librarian as an example because that's an easy one. Let's say someone is still in library school, they're going to graduate in December, but we have a position open now, and we would hire them at that minimum knowing that they're not meeting the minimum requirements for the job. So very few people should actually be coming in at a minimum, and even if they are coming in at a minimum, we might want to consider then raising them up slightly once they get, you know, past a probation period or after the first year or something like that. And we're talking about, the department heads or the managers and I are talking about ways to incorporate some ways that we can reward people for outstanding performance or, you know, years of service, those kinds of things. So that one of the things that we struggle with at Morton Grove is that there isn't a lot of room to go up. And so we do see a fair number of turnover every couple of years or so, particularly in the adult services department, as this is a great job for people coming out of library school. They get to do a lot of different things, but then frequently they'll move on because either they're getting more money, usually it's because they're getting more money, I'll be completely honest. So that's been a struggle for us. And so one of the things, so you have, if you looked, you actually had a couple sheets with everyone's actual salary on there. And you can see that most everyone is falling below the midpoint. So one of the recommendations, you know, HR sources, you could do a number of things. You can just kind of say, we're raising everyone to midpoint, which we're not doing. You can do it over a couple of years. You can, you know, I think they give one other example or whatever. So one of the things that I did in preparation when I was preparing the budget was looked at the recommendations from HR source, looked at each of the positions and the performance based on my, you know, what I have seen and in discussions with the department heads, and then made some adjustments to people's salaries. And so the amount that I'm asking for here incorporates the amounts that I anticipate that I would like to be able to give our staff for next year. So those people that wouldn't get some kind of market increase, if you would get either a 0 to 3% merit raise, depending on their performance, because there are some people that are not, obviously, you know, they're over the midpoint and in a couple places over the maximum, primarily due to longevity. But so that's where that bigger increase in salaries comes from, is based on the work that HR Source done, and then me taking that and trying to incorporate that into our salaries in order to keep us competitive. So, unemployment, we do not pay unemployment insurance. We very infrequently have unemployment claims. We did last year and this year. That has ended. I don't anticipate that we will have to do that in the future. I don't anticipate any unemployment claims next year. It's hard to anticipate those sometimes, but we have figured out, done the computations. The reason we don't pay for insurance is it costs us more insurance than we've ever had to pay out in unemployment, so because it happens so infrequently. So that has been 0. Retirement, as I explained, I'm going to just go with my notes. The library participates in 2 different retirement plans. If you've read my notes, I think that the MRF plan, as I said, was a plan that the village and the library used to do. That ended in 2005. At that point, people were given the option to either go with IMRF, which is the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, which most public employees in the state of Illinois participate in. It's a requirement if you're in some jobs. Like you can't start working for Morton Grove Public Library as a full-time employee and not participate in IMRF. So you can see the MRF plan we pay out once a year. That's if, for those of you, I don't know, Tamara wasn't here, we had to pay $169,000. Carlotta always gasps a little when she signs that check. That's once a year. The IMRF pays out with payroll, and we actually make that payment to the village because they're the authorized agent. But last year, IMRF dropped considerably from the year before, down to 7.64%. For next year, it will go up to 8.45%, which is still significantly lower than the last several years, as you've seen. And it's based simply on the number, on the salaries of people that are eligible for IMRF, and to be eligible for IMRF, you have to work 10,080 hours, 1,000 hours? 1,000 hours, I think it's 1,000 hours. That usually averages out to, like, if you, as long as you're not, you can't work 20, if you're working 20 hours, you're eligible for IMRF, is pretty much how that works out too. So this mostly applies to our full-time staff, and we have 2 circulation clerks who are currently working 23.5 hours a week. So, but it's mostly professional staff that this applies to. And well, it's full-time. I shouldn't even say professional, it's full-time.
What percentage of the IMRF is by the, does the employee put in?
The employee portion never changes. The employee puts in 4.65% per paycheck, and then the IMRF determines IMRF determines the employer rate, and then they tell us every year.
Right,
so
right.
It's not like every year it has to be 10% and you make up the difference or whatever. It's whatever the returns on investments are and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So last year the reason it went down so much is because their returns on investments were phenomenal, and then for 2020 they weren't quite as good. So they figure this out every year. They give us an estimate, usually beginning of the summer, and then they give us a final estimate, and usually the end of summer, beginning of fall. And usually their estimate stays the same as their final one. So, but the employee portion always stays the same. It's always 4.65%. Okay. It's never, as far as I know, it's never changed, and I've been doing this in Illinois for 30 years. So that's how I come up with that retirement number. No increase here because actually we figured pretty high for last year for IMRF, and certainly then with the elimination of the IT manager position that helped us in terms of not having to pay out those IMRF funds. And then also because a few years ago, as I said in my explanation, they had made some major adjustments a few years ago in the MRF plan, and we had to pay a lot more in than I had budgeted for that year. I always try to budget a little bit high, just to make sure that I've got the money, because I never know what that exact number is gonna be until the actuary sends me, or the auditor sends me, the actuary sends me everything. And that's usually not till the end of the year. So, I try to base this, I try to make that number higher, just to make sure that I'm not having to pay for something I did. I mean, the year that we had to pay more than we had budgeted for, we were off by, or we were down, it was like $50,000. So it was, luckily we had the funds, but it was a big, and it wasn't really anything we could have planned for. It was that they changed actuaries and they looked at some different formulas, and I think we got some more detail and stuff like that, so we can't not pay it. And the other thing, as I said, we have to continue to pay that as long as we have participants. The last two people, we actually have 3 people that are still on the MRF plan. Blanche is on the MRF plan, one of the maintenance workers, Polo, and then Natalia. So, are the last 3 on the MRF plan. So that number I was able to keep the same because I usually try to figure high. So this is a little bit closer this year for 2020 than that. Sorry. Health insurance is up slightly. Again, with the IT manager position being eliminated and that person gone, we have fewer healthcare costs this year. We have, I think, 1 or 2 more eligible employees this year for health insurance than we had in previous years. So, and when I'm doing the budget, we do have some staff that waive health insurance through the library, but I still have to budget for that, just in case their situation changes. I mean, that happens all the time, where someone may get it through their spouse, and all of a sudden they can't get insurance through their spouse, or it's cheaper for them to get it through the library. So, so I budgeted for 26 eligible employees. And then assuming that there'll be a 5% increase in health insurance costs, and that they'll all choose the higher cost plan. We have 2 health insurance plans. And so again, it's one of those situations where I always budget high because I have no choice, I have to pay this. So I'd rather make sure that I have the money and not need it and be able to put it in special reserves at the end of the year than need it and not have it. So, and the hard thing about this is that last year, I had budgeted for an 8% increase in health insurance costs, and we don't find out the health insurance costs until usually end of October. So I'm making some best guesses here, which are not, I mean, I've been doing this a long time, so I usually not too bad, but last year I budgeted for an 8% increase in health insurance costs, and while there were increases in both plans, the Plan A, the more expensive and higher end plan only went up 2%, and then the Plan B only went up 4%. So we were still well within the amounts that I had budgeted for, but as I said, this year I'm assuming a 5% increase across the board with more employees, so I think we should be okay there, but that is why that's a little higher. And like I said, probably within the next month, hopefully, or so, I'll have but I don't think before our October meeting, but by the end of the year I should know what the health insurance costs are, and things are crazy a little bit, so that's always a little bit of a guessing game. The rest of the fees under the personnel expenses are things that have kept relatively flat over the past few years. I did ask for a little bit more in the FSA/EBC fees. Those are the flat spending account fees, and that's just a more accurate reflection of what we've spent the past couple of years. And like I said, the other ones are stayed the same, and those have been pretty static. Any questions about those budget lines? So the next big section is our materials and services. Most of what we see in this section are amounts that the department has asked for, and I've had meetings with them to discuss what it is they want and why they may be asking for more or less money. So as you can see in books, both departments have asked for slightly less money. Some of the decrease comes due to participation in CCS. That has made certainly a difference in the number of things that we've had to purchase, because we've been able to get a lot of things directly from the 25 other libraries that are in CCS now. Some of that reflects moving purchases of e-content to other budget lines. The IPLA report, the state of Illinois requires that we do a public library annual report, and every year they change how they want you to count your e-resources. So we always try to accommodate those changes, so we'll typically move those monies around depending on where we need to take that money out of for purchase of e-content. So as I said, the book budget money, those are a direct reflection of what Natalia and Courtney have asked for in those two lines. The periodical budget has gone down slightly. Some of that is related to more and more magazines not choosing to purchase a print copy anymore, and so that happens frequently throughout the year. And then we are changing jobbers for provision of our periodicals, which are a little cheaper as well. And then e-periodicals this year, we pulled out, last year we had kept in the periodical budget the purchase of Flipster, which is an online magazine resource. And we actually, in the middle of the year, pulled that out because it was easier for staff to track. And so that's reflected in this year's budget. It wasn't reflected in next year's budget, it was just internal. So you'll see that that's $4,000 for that.